Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, for being here with us for the third cave show, in which we will learn more about the classical caves and karst. I am Marta Daniela Santos. I work at the Center for Ecology, Evolution, and Environmental Changes in Portugal. I am a science communication officer, and our research center is the one organizing this cave show, which is a series of webinars that take place within the International Year of Caves and Karst, organized by the International Union of Speleology, of which we are partners. During this webinar, you can leave questions on the YouTube live chat, which you can find on your right on the screen. And after the presentation, we will ask our invited speakers some of the questions that you will share with us on the chat. And without further delay, I will now give the floor to Ana Sofia Reboleira. She's a researcher at the Center for Ecology, Evolution, and Environmental Changes, and she is the person responsible for the idea of organizing the cave show. So without further delay, please, the floor is yours, Ana Sofia.
Thank you very much, Marta. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where on the world you are right now. Welcome to this third edition of the Cave Show, a series of online seminars about cave science, but also about our passion for caves. Before introducing our guests tonight, we would like to welcome you to the Cave Animal of the Year, Portugal, which is the Portuguese predaceous cave diving beetle. You'll be able to find information about this on a link that we will post shortly on the chat. Today, I am thrilled and honored to present our edition about the Classical Karst. I will give now the floor to Professor Stein Erik Lauritzen from the University of Bergen, our co-host of the Cave Show, that will now present our guest tonight. Stein Erik, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here and to present Dr. Matej Blatnik from the Karst Institute in Postojna. The Karst Institute in Postojna is actually situated within the Classical Karst. And it is one of the oldest speleological institutes in Europe, with about between 25 and 30 employees altogether. And they have been in existence for 80 or 90 years. Dr. Matej Blatnik is now a researcher at the Institute, and his main interest is karst hydrogeology, the groundwater movement in karst, where he has done work on numerical modeling and on the eco-hydrology of the karst. Matej has also been involved in the study of ice caves, and he is a very active researcher, and he's now going to tell us the background story about why things are called karst, and where this word and where all these concepts and our passion originated in. So Matej, please, the audience is yours.
Matej,
thank you very much for this introduction, Stein Erik. I will just directly share the screen about the presentation, where you already mentioned that today we will talk about the history of the research in the area which is called Classical Karst, also about some terminological issues, and current work at Karst Research Institute. So here on the picture, we can see the town or small village Gradschnitzel, which is located near Kaloshkotzian caves, which are also famous by spacious cave biodiversity, and therefore it is also part of the UNESCO heritage. and also Ramsar Convention. I will begin with this map, which is showing karst distribution in the Europe. So the green color presents the areas which are underlain by carbonate rocks, and Slovenia is located here. So it is at the contact between Alps, Dinaric mountains here, and Adriatic Sea in the south. If I go closer to the area of Slovenia, it has about 47% of the area which is karstic, and which is also divided to 3 areas. In the north, there is alpine karst, part of Alps. There is isolated karst, which is characterized with sporadic outcrops of karstic rocks. And in the south, it is Dinaric karst, which basically stretches from the Italy through Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, and also Montenegro. Here on this place, I also marked the area which is called Kras. So it is Kras Plateau, which is partially on Slovenian side and on Italian side. And this word also origins for the word karst, which was slightly modified, and it is easier to pronounce. Classical Karst is this area marked with a triangle, and it stretches between Trieste, Ljubljana, capital of Slovenia, and Rijeka, town in Croatia. So between 3 countries, and presents the area which has the longest history of karst exploration in general. So later I will go through the history, but first a little bit about terminology. So here is one picture which is showing the surface of the area which is called Plateau Kras or Carso in Italian. So the area which has a rocky surface, many karstic landforms, and not really dense vegetation, really relatively harsh conditions. And because of this history, because this plateau has its name, it was a little bit modified into karst. In this word is also general term for all phenomena where karst processes are taking place, also in English and other languages. There are some other words which also originate from Slavic word. So I will begin with the name polje, which originally means field, but also the largest of karst depressions that occur in karst surface. So here on the picture is Planinsko polje when it is partially flooded. And so this is one of these words, but then I will continue with another one, which is probably not so widespread in English terminology. So in Slovenian it's called vrtača, but it can also be called as dolina. So these are very small depressions, up to several meters or tens of meters wide and deep. So there are more of them close to the village Veliki Korin. And in English terminology, somewhere you can also see this name dolina or doline, but usually it is called as a sinkhole. And the last one, but maybe there are more of them, is in Slovenian požiralnik, but in some other Slavic languages it is called as ponor, and presents the place where surface stream reaches karst area and sinks underground in caves or other fractures. So this is called ponor. You can see somewhere in some papers this word, but usually it is called as swallow hole. And if I now continue with the classical karst, I borrowed this map from co-worker Andrej Mihevc, who made it, and presents southwestern Slovenia. So here is also Italy and Croatia, and this red line presents the important water division. What is on left side? So in the west, discharges towards the Adriatic Sea, and what is on the right side on the east, this is the water which flows towards Black Sea. There are two important catchments in the area of the Classical Karst. So one of them is the catchment of the Rijeka River. At first, it flows in the surface over the Flysch area, and then it sinks underground into Škocjanske Škocjan caves, and then it flows through several spacious caves towards the spring of the Timavo River. So on another side is another important catchment of the Ljubljana River. From one side, water comes from the Puca Basin, where there is also Postojna and Karst Research Institute, and it sinks into Postojnskiyama. And from another side, water springs already on Croatian side, and then flows over series of karst poljes, over Loško polje, Cerkniško polje, Kaloshkotzian, and then underground joins together with the Puca River. Then it flows over Planinsko polje and underground towards the series of the springs of the Ljubljana River. I mentioned quite many names of poljes and other areas, but I will repeat them also later through the presentation of particular areas. If I begin with the history now, some descriptions or just mentions of some karst areas are probably about 2000 years old. Some people, when they're traveling around, already mentioned Cerkniško polje, which is marked with the red circle. They also mentioned Škocjanske Škocjan cave, and also springs of the Timavo River. But these were just description, not yet scientific explanations of behavior. They become later, and one of first such descriptions have been made by Werner already in 16th century, but not so much information about that. So it was probably more about the flooding dynamics of the Cerkniško polje, which is shown here on this panoramic image, Cerkniško polje, when it is partially flooded. But the most comprehensive work from the early history of the research of the area has been made by Janez Vajkard Valvazor. Already in 17th century, he was traveling around the country, which was such times Habsburg monarchy, so the area around Slovenia and also in the vicinity. He was basically describing the land, castles, people, and how they are living there. And among of many descriptions, which are on more than 300,000 pages, he also mentioned and described the karst, also in the classical karst. So Cerkniško polje, Kaloshkotzian, Planinsko polje, springs of the Ljubljana River, Postojna Basin, Škocjanskiyama, and so on. Here on the left side is the picture of Valvazor, and on the right side the set of 4 books, original from 1689. Books with plenty of text and even more pictures that he made during his traveling around. One of these pictures is showing also Cerkniško polje, or Cerknica Lake, the polje when it is flooded, here with its surrounding of Javorniki mountains, all names of surface inflows, karstic inflows, some caves already mentioned, so detailed map. And not only maps, also for that time scientific explanations of flooding behavior. This is the picture which is not so easy to understand, but as I know, it shows the mountain and several underground lakes at different levels, which are interconnected with different channels, sumps, and this was his explanation how the Cerkniško polje or Cerknica Lake can has different stages, and that at different times some springs or estuaries behave as springs and also swallow holes. He also mentioned some other places. He was fan of castles, and on this picture is the castle Prediama, located in the wall, and behind it is about or almost 20 kilometers long cave system with multiple entrances. First hundreds of meters were accessible long time ago. The proof are these signatures, which are also from 16th and 17th century. First hundreds of meters are spacious, were easy to reach, but at some places later cavers had to dig more and also discovered kilometers of caves behind. So the cave, which was made by the active water flow, bringing a lot of pebbles, gravel, and there is also a lot of flowstone. Part of the cave is also open for tourist visits, so you're also welcome there. There were many later research, which were, for example, made by Steinberg, Hake, and Gruber in 18th century, also describing flooding behavior, but also other things like biodiversity, animals and plants over the area, and some descriptions were also dedicated to karst area. Then at the end, or already in 17th century, but also in 19th century, also first show caves were opened. Tourist visit looked differently like now, but in documentation it was listed that in the cave Vyrenitza in 1633 they already started with guided tours in the cave, and almost 200 years ago, about 200 years ago, they also started with the book or with a list of visitors that entered the cave. Here is one picture from 18th century showing the cave Vyrenitza inside, and here is also the photo showing it. So like for many other caves in the classical karst, also for the cave Vyrenitza is characteristic plenty of flowstone features inside. At the beginning of 19th century, the local caver from Postojna, or he was not yet caver, entered Postojnskiyama. He successfully passed the river inside, the river Putic, and after that he discovered thousands of meters of the cave. So before, small part was known, which is also marked with plenty of signatures, also from 12th or 13th century, but the tourism began after this discovery in 1819. So first with torches, about 50 years later, they already built the railway inside. So also the cave was also accessible for fine people, and employees were pushing the trolley through the cave. There is another picture showing the fashion in that times, which is a little bit different than now. And pictures from nowadays with nice illumination in the cave and two famous stalagmites in the cave. Some parts of the cave are also accessible as adventure tourism, like this one on this picture. And some places are accessible only for divers. In last several years or tens of years, there are intensive explorations underwater, where the goal is to connect the cave with another famous cave nearby, which is called Planinskiyama. So there are several kilometers with sumps inside, and only about 1,000 meters is still missing to connect these two caves. There is also one advertisement picture showing how the train looks now. So electric train, and almost 1 million visitors every year, except the last year. And the last pictures about Postojnskiyama, which is showing the entrance complex and the water, the river Putic, which is flowing there and sinking inside of Postojnskiyama. Another cave which was open for tourists the same year, Kaloshkotzian. Here is one old picture showing it. and the picture which showing cave exploration at the end of 19th century. The cave is known with by a very deep canyon, so some places were hard to accessible, only on the water or climbing on very steep walls. But the cave, as we know it now, was already explored at the end of 19th century by these people here. As I said before, the cave is also part of UNESCO Heritage and Ramsar Convention. And this picture is showing the part which is open for tourists and with active flow of the river Rijeka. Another picture from another site. Here on the left side of the picture is also the passage which is called Hanke Channel and Martel Chamber, which is on the picture here. Here is myself for the scale, so I'm very small in comparison to the chamber, which has the ceiling 140 meters high and presents, I think, the second biggest chamber in Europe. And my attempt of taking picture of the same place, so Martel Chamber in Gradschnitzel. And another picture which is showing the entrance to this part of the cave, which is characterized by very narrow and high passage. At the end of 19th century, another cave was opened for tourists. So this is Divashka picture taken by Mark Burke. And another cave, Dimnice, and picture taken by Peter Gadej. Another show cave opened quite early. If I continue with the history, there were also some very important research on the topic of cave fauna. Already 250 years ago was described this cave amphibian, which is called Proteus sanguinus, or human fish, and it is living in the entire dynamic karst, so from Italy up to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and most likely also in Montenegro. In Slovenia, there is also another sort of this species, which is called black Proteus, and it is present only at 6 locations in Slovenia. And as a difference, besides the color, the difference is also morphology of the head and also presence of eyes. Another animal which was described long time ago is this cave beetle called Leptodilus hohenwaldti. It was found by Lukacic, who also discovered passages in Postojna and then described by Hohenwald. Later, many other people visited this area because the classical karst over the history belonged to different countries like Habsburg monarchy, Austro-Hungarian Empire, Italy, Yugoslavia. So people were coming from different areas like Lindner, Hanke, Moser, Putic, Hofstede, Zombati, and some others. So at the end of 19th century, at the beginning of 20th century, they did a lot of work, not only research work, but also engineer work for preventing the floods. Here on the picture is Planinsko polje at different seasons of the year and also different hydrological situation, from moderate floods here, high floods during winter in the middle picture, and also non-flooded area, which is most normal because Planinsko polje is flooded up to 3 months per year. But there were already some troubles for local people who were living there, and the goal was to mitigate the flooding in the area. So engineer William Putic came from nowadays Czech Republic, and he constructed different regulations of the riverbed, so they were widened and also walled at some places. And here are also 2 examples of Putic's wells. So these were 2 swallow holes which were further enlarged, walled, and also reinforced with these gratings which were preventing the floating debris that could enter the swallow holes. The attempt was not completely successful because later they realized that the closest point in the underground system were further in the aquifer, not really at the entrance, but it was easier to clean floating debris which came there. Nowadays, this Putic well looks like this, so more than 100 years old, but still in good condition, still working. During moderate waters, they look like this. So two active waterfalls are falling down, like also in this picture. And some explorations, not only by Putic, but some other people were also made in the cave Planinskiyama, which is about 6 kilometers long cave, and most of discoveries were made at the end of 19th century. So here is one old image, and this is an aerial photo showing the cave entrance here and the river Unica, which flows out from the cave. Here is one picture made from ground showing a high water level when about 80 cubic meters of water per second flows out. And when you continue further in the cave, you cross the bridge with the lake, because after that there is also one small dam for hydropower production. This is the main passage with the Unica river, also with the high water. And inside, after 700 meters, there is very important junction. It's probably the largest or the second largest underground confluence in Europe. From the left side comes the water Piuka directly from Postojnskiyama, and from the right side the river Rak, which comes from Technicalia polje and Kaloshkotzian, which I will also describe later. Then water flows together as the Unica river outside. This is one of these passages where the river Rak flows in Planinskiyama, and where there is a black color, we can clearly see up to which level water can come during the high water events. William Putic also made important work in the cave Gradschnitzel. There are two very old images showing challenging work, how to go inside of the cave, which has about 80 meters deep entrance shaft. So they used special equipment to go down and up. And during the first expedition, they already reached the lowest part of the cave, which is 200 meters deep, and they reached the sump at the lowest part. Here is one photo showing this entrance shaft, 80 meters deep, and a very spacious chamber at the lowest part of the cave, which is named Putic's chamber. Like on one of previous photo, here we can also see a brown line which denoting the highest position of the water level, and in this cave the water can increase and decrease for about 60 meters. During high water conditions it looks like this, so almost the whole chamber is completely flooded. If we go a little bit upstream from Planinskiyama, we come to Kaloshkotzian, which is like a small karst polje. It can also be mentioned as karst valley or karst window, with some natural bridges and spring and ponor caves. This picture was already made by Valvazor more than 300 years ago. But if we go through the images, here we can see the surface flow of the river Rak and small depression around, which is long about 2 kilometers. On the spring side, the water comes out from Zeškajame and then flows under small natural bridge. Here is the entrance of Zeškajame, the cave which you can reach by boat, and is about 6 kilometers long. And then water flows over the surface for 2 kilometers, also below large natural bridge, and then it sinks into cave Tkalcajama, about 3 kilometers long cave. So this is another old picture showing large natural bridge, which is outside, and the entrance of the cave, Tkalcayama. So looks the first part of the cave where the water sinks inside. If we go even more upstream, we come to Cerkniško polje. This is the situation when the water level is low, so there is surface flow of the river Stržen, which is meandering and sinks there behind into water active caves. During high water, it looks like this. The polje has about 38 square kilometers. It's the biggest flooded in Slovenia. The flooded area has about 27 square kilometers also in this hydrological situation, when we also have peninsula and island. And this village here is called Otok, what means island. Polje has many surface inflows on the northern side, also karstic inflows from here from the right side of the picture, many estavels in this area and also some other areas. Estavels are phenomena which during increase of the water level behave as springs, and during decrease, during recession, they behave as swallow holes, and there is a big number of them. And the goal of researchers, which are also made at the end of 19th century and the beginning of 20th century, was mitigate flooding dynamics there. For this purpose, they visited different areas. Here, for example, is a spring cave Suhadolca, which was also described by Valvazor in 17th century. They were studying estavels here in the area of Zadnji kraj, where are hundreds of them. They were also studying other estavels. This is the area which is called Rešeto during the period when estavels are flooded, while during low waters they can be completely dry. And here is already one example, which is not from so long time ago, where they built the dam to prevent that all water can sink inside and the polje is completely dry. Cerkniško polje is also famous by its biodiversity, with really large number of species of fish and birds. And the goal is that during the lowest water, the polje is not completely dry. So for this purpose, here is the dam, and we can see how these estavels looks like when they are completely dry. They also made some other construction work. Here is the original riverbed of the river Stržen, which is meandering. And in past decades, they made some shortcuts that the water can flow as quick as possible out from the polje, but this was not a good idea. So in several years ago, they deepened again old riverbeds, and they blocked shortcuts, because nowadays the goal is that the polje is flooded as long as possible, and the water pours around at all places that doesn't flow directly towards the area of swallow holes. There is also one example of the cave entrance of the Velika Karlovica about 90 years ago, with original entrance. And here is one new picture which is showing the result of different constructions. So here there are old wooden gratings preventing floating debris that could enter the cave, and there is also one dam which prevents the water that flows. The complete amount can flow through the cave. So at the same time, there are some works which are blocking the water, and also some works which forces the process that the polje can drain out. Behind the cave is about 15 kilometers long system, which is interconnected. So one previous entrance was Velika Karlovica or Big Karlovica, and this cave joins together with Mala Karlovica or Small Karlovica. In the vicinity of the Technical polje, there is also another relatively famous show cave, which is called Gradschnitzel or Cross Cave in English, and it is famous by visit of the cave by the boat. During high waters, the visit is not possible, so because too big amount of water flows through the cave. But when the situation is good enough, you can reach also the most remote places. So the cave is famous by really clear water and plenty of flowstone. And this picture was taken by one of the most famous cave photographer, Peter Gede, during one cave visit. If I continue with the history, so already in 19th century and at the beginning of 20th century, first caving societies established, one in Trieste, in Postojna, and also quite soon in Ljubljana. Then in this period, there were intensive cave exploration, some of them already described, but some of them also brought for some time the world cave depth record, which was in this area. One of caves which were explored in that times, and it is still under exploration, is the cave Gradschnitzel, in English Snake Cave. Here on the map is the entrance shaft, which is 160 meters deep, and on the right side one picture of it made by Robichon. The Gradschnitzel is following Kaloshkotzian, so it is draining the water from Rijeka river, and after it there is a series of more caves which were discovered later, but one which was already known in 19th century is also Abisso di Trebiciano, so the cave which is located on Italian side of the plateau, Kras, Carso, and at the time when they reached the bottom, it was 329 meters deep, and for some time the deepest known in the world. And during the whole series of shafts are equipped by ladders, so it was relatively easy to reach when this was built. And another one which is following Abisso di Trebiciano is Grotta Gigante, another cave with really spacious chamber, but it doesn't reach the underground flow of the Rijeka river. So all these white circles are presenting early researchers, and as a result, this area is called as a Classical Karst between, as we already mentioned, Ljubljana in Slovenia, Trieste in Italy, and Rijeka in Croatia. And here we are slowly coming to the establishment of the Karst Research Institute, which is positioned in Postojna, in the middle of the classical karsts, close to all karst areas and caves, which are marked with black dots. The institute was established during Italian times, when the land was part of the Italy, in 1929. And this picture was taken some years later, in showing the building in that times. And nowadays it looks a little bit different, without trees in front of the building, without small hills. So after the Second World War in 1947, when the area belonged to Yugoslavia, we continued the work with Karst Research Institute there. And the goal already at the beginning was interdisciplinary research, so research of the karst areas for very different perspectives, and one of them is, for example, geomorphology. So we are studying geomorphological features from the smallest scale, like Rillen here, up to the largest, like karst poljes. And one of the most important findings in that times was discovery of unroofed caves. So the last stage of caves, they are slowly disappearing, and here close to the Kaloshkotzian, several kilometers of previously active cave passages have been discovered, and they are already open to the surface. Another important topic is geology in karst areas. For example, analysis of sediments, their composition, their age. We discovered there that sediments and therefore also caves can be several millions old, up to 5 or maybe even more. We are also studying a paleo karst there. Another very important topic is hydrogeology. There is almost 100 years long history of tracing experiments with which we are studying the direction and velocity of the underground water flow. We are also measuring other groundwater parameters, physical and chemical, to study their quality and quantity. Here, for example, is one almost 50 years old map showing very comprehensive tracing experiments with plenty of injection points and sampling points on another side. So here are pathways which are very interweaving. We also continued with biological analysis. So in recent decades, also many new animal species in caves have been discovered. The topic which is increasing by importance is also microbiology, mainly the analysis what is the impact of tourism in caves. Then geochemistry, which is supplemented by hydrogeology, so studying the quality and quantity of the water and its changes over time. Then physical analysis, which are characterized also by construction of different models. Here below is one example of modeling of speleogenesis, development of karst channels, conduits. We are also modeling cave climate, so air circulation in different caves, and also modeling of other things. And then, of course, history that we already presented before, the history of cave explorations in Slovenia. The biggest advantage of this is the multidisciplinarity of all analyses. Also, nowadays, projects are really dependent on this. All projects that we have are mostly related to water quality and other, other impacts of people, and all these researchers, for these researchers is really necessary to interconnect different research topics. We are also dependent on long-term data. Luckily, we have more than 70 years long time series of hydrological and meteorological measurements with which we can analyze the water quality and quantity in the past. And our work is also very important when there are construction works in karst systems. So we are there before the work starts, and also with monitoring of effects when roads or railways and other things are built. Karst Research Institute also consists of different things and is the head of different institutions. I will go directly towards pictures. So there is a very big library which consisting of books and journals with karstic literature. It is not only this room. There behind is one bigger with which is full of books and journals. On the right side there is a wardrobe showing the cave register for more than 40,000 known caves in Slovenia. For more than 60 years, we are also publishing the journal, which is dedicated to karstology and is called Acta Karstologica. So if you are interested, you're more than welcome to publish your work there. And it is also the head, at the Institute is also the head office of the United Speleological Union, which is also marked with this label. Every year, except the last year, in the last 30 years, we are also organizing the conference, which is called International Karstological School. So it consists of lectures and even more field trips. This year it will be virtual, but you are still welcome to present your work there. And what about other areas in Slovenia? Slovenia, there is not only classical karst. There are also karst areas in Alps, in the middle of Slovenia, in southeast, and there are also some important areas, caves and other features. So here, for example, are several show caves in these areas. One is Županova Jama, translated into Mayor Caves. Another one is Kostanjeviška Jama, also opened for tourists. Then Krška Jama, and in Alpine area also the show cave with the highest altitude in Slovenia, which is Snežna Jama, translated into snow cave. So you're welcome to visit them. In Alpine area are also very important plateaus with really big density of caves developed by melting of the ice from glaciers. So here is Kanin Plateau, and close to it is Rombon Plateau, with several caves also up to 1,500 meters deep. Here is one example of Renevo Brezno with its entrance close to in the plateau, which is nicely polished by the glacier. And when you climb down through a series of shafts, you reach the collector, where you also have to climb a little bit. So there are vertical shafts on this picture, and the final sump at 1,200 meters deep. So also spacious chambers there. There are also some ice caves. Here is one example from Velika Jama u Paradani, Paradana ice cave, where the amount of ice is shrinking, and in the past this cave was very important source for the ice. Local people were also cutting it, and they were transporting it to Italy, to Trieste, and some of its amount also reached the Egypt, for example. So very important material for cooling different things. Here is another picture of the entrance chamber, but the cave is almost 900 meters deep. And not only caves, there are also some other interesting areas in the karst area. For example, Boka waterfall, the 90 meters deep waterfall, then Kozjak waterfall here, down right, then river and current features in Alpine area and Alps in general, close to the Triglav mountain, the highest mountain in Slovenia. And before I end, I already mentioned International Karstological School that we organized every year. So this year will be as usual in the middle of June, but not as usually as a live event. It will be on virtual. You're welcome to attend. The deadline for registration and abstract submission is at the end of April, so 2 days left. And we are also inviting you to a PhD study program in karstology, which is also the only one in the world. Is it at University of Nova Gorica? So if you are interested to study this, you're also welcome there. And for the very end, thank you very much for your attention. I hope it was interesting, and I'm waiting for questions.
Thank you so much, Matej, for your very interesting talk. You took us on a journey through the classical karst, not only on surface, but also on caves that we love so much. So we have some interesting questions from the public. So I will now ask Marta to ask you those questions, and then we will continue our talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much also, Matej, for your presentation. It was really, really nice, and you really took us on a journey, on a great journey. I will now check the messages that we have on the chat, and perhaps invite you to stop sharing your screen so that everybody can see you better when we ask the questions. So we have one question, which is, I hope I pronounced correctly. How accurate was Valvasor's rough explanation for flooding and sinking Technica Lake? Thank you.
For the very beginning, it was good description, but as it is still normal, all explanations are improving, and maybe in the future also our research work won't be completely accurate. So the goal is to improve our knowledge. No, he was not really precise. Among other things, he was also believing in witches, if this is a good comparison. But it was, anyway, it was really good attempt with simulation of underground lakes, underground connections between different places. And in these terms, it was not bad.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matej. For now, we don't have further questions on the chat yet, but we invite you, if you have further questions, to please leave them on the chat that you have on your right on the screen. And I give back the floor now to Stein Erik, which I believe has a question or a comment.
Yeah. Yes, I do. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Matej, this was a very interesting and very well done overview of the Classical Karst and the Classical Karst Institute. You mentioned in the beginning of the diving, well, there has been done a lot of water tracing experiments, which you showed so excellently. But what about the diving between Postojna and Planinskiyama? Has there been a breakthrough, or what is the status of that now?
Unfortunately, not yet. From 5 years ago, the straight line distance is about 600 meters that is missing between both caves. But it became problematic because from one side, from Postojnskiyama, there is a series of several sumps, but divers mostly have to walk between them. So it is really long journey, difficult journey, and non-divers, we cannot help them there. Mm-hmm. So at this point, we are also looking if there will be another cave entrance when we can come down through the shaft and we can skip some passages. Mm-hmm. And from another side, from Planinskiyama, there is very deep sump, very spacious, with quite low visibility, and here it is hard to find the right way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you also. I don't know, Anna-Sophia, do you have further questions?
No, I would like, so you are organizing the Karstological school that will be fully virtual this year. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct.
Okay, so the best part of the Karstological school, which is the which are the field trips, and the social part of the event,
yeah,
are virtual.
Yeah, there are some minuses, but there are also advantages. So it is accessible for everybody who usually has problems to travel, to find the time, because the live event takes more time, and at least because there is a lack of conference in last periods, also virtual event is a good opportunity to present your work. So you're invited there, and hopefully there will be plenty of us.
Thank you. Thank you. And we have, I introduce now another question from the public that is on the chat of YouTube from Hector Donis from Puerto Rico. So we are really worldwide on our seminar, on our webinar. So his question is, is graffiti commonly found on the mentioned caves?
In some of them, but fortunately not everywhere. But it was a tradition that in the past, people reached the places which were accessible, so easily accessible, and when they came to the most remote part where there was no possibility to continue to progress at this place, they signed, they wrote their names and also the year. But this is not yet welcome now, because this is also kind of pollution, and whereas the early description are quite important source, very important source of information to see when exactly this cave has already been known, and also they can be kind of artistic, but nowadays not anymore.
Thank you, Matej. We are now approaching the time of closing the session, but we still have time for one further comment or question. Now, Anna Sophia, do you have a further comment?
Well, we would like to announce the next cave show. So it will be on the 26th of May, and we will have with us Professor Joe de Welle from the University of Bologna, the oldest university in our planet. And Joe will talk about Let's Follow That River Underground. Are all caves carved by rivers? So thank you so much for being here with us today. I hope you enjoyed Matej's talk as we did, and we are looking forward to see you soon. Have a good evening.